Good morning. I'm Olivier Blin, partner at Russell Reynolds Associates. I'm here with Dana Krueger, who run our healthcare sector globally, and with David Hale, the CEO of Guerbet.
Thank you, David, again for joining us. Could you please kick us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and the journey you've been on as a new CEO starting at the beginning of 2020?
Yes, I have to say I didn't know what I was signing up for. For sure, when I took the role, I wasn't expecting to have this come along literally 3 or 4 weeks into the job. I think the journey we have been on has been one that's, at least for me personally as a leader, has been very interesting and has had, obviously, its ups and downs. I think a couple of the interesting aspects for us has been, first of all, we're in a healthcare business. So from a economic perspective, that's what I keep telling my teams, we're incredibly fortunate in the sense that we ourselves have some products that are actually being used in terms of COVID diagnosis. And because it's healthcare products, we know that just mechanically and structurally, it's a market that will not disappear and will grow. So I would say from while we've definitely been impacted, being able to project a vision of, hey, we will get out of this and we will get out of this together, I think has been extremely useful for myself, but also for the team. I think the second thing that it forced us to do was quite quickly prioritize and focus. And from day one, where I think we really realized the impact of what was coming, we very quickly said, look, we only have 2 priorities until we get through this. The first one is the health and safety of our colleagues, and the second one is business continuity. And business continuity also because we provide products and solutions that are actually being used. So we also have I would say, a moral responsibility to continue to provide those as well. And honestly, those 2 things have been incredibly motivating, and we've used them as guardrails. So every time we make a decision of, hey, are we going to prioritize this? Are we going to go left? Are we going to go right? We are always asking ourselves, does it fit in those 2 priorities? And if it doesn't, then it's on hold. We'll wait a while. And I think the organization started to see quite quickly that it wasn't just, PowerPoint, blah, blah. We actually were putting actions behind the words. We immediately sent people home and started remote working literally almost from one day to the next. We immediately worked with our different industrial sites to figure out the best ways. Were there roles that we could actually have working from home? How did we protect the people that had to work closely together with masks, with visors, with other things? We actually had some of our own sites that started making their own hydroalcoholic solution, not just for themselves, but it kind of became sort of engaging factor in the sense that they started making it. And after work, we had volunteers that would go around and deliver it to the retirement communities or to some of the local pharmacies in the areas where the factories are located. And the other thing that we did was we started having an all-employee call every 2 weeks. And I know that there's no rocket science to that, but that was actually new for Guerbet. So historically, we had a call with the leadership team once a month, but there was never, ever, literally ever, a communication mechanism with all the employees on a regular basis. And we started doing it every 2 weeks. And Guerbet has roughly 3,000 employees. And on these calls, we have anywhere from 15 to 1,700 people that connect. We do one in the morning for Asia Pacific. We repeat it around lunchtime in French because that's our largest population is in France, or a large part of the population. And then we do it again at the end of the day for the Americas and South America. And honestly, at a certain point, you think, my gosh, I'm just rehashing the same messages. How can this possibly be? You don't have that much to say in 2 weeks sometimes. And yet the feedback has been, please, after the crisis, whatever you do, don't stop this. Probably we won't do every 2 weeks. We'll do once a month. But the feedback has really been, don't stop this.
And what do you talk about on those calls? How do you define your key messages on an ongoing basis?
At the beginning, it was really around safety and what we were doing to make sure that we kept the business running. And from a safety perspective, we completely 100% transparent about how many COVID cases we had, where they were, and if the colleagues were safe and okay, and were we able to make sure that we quarantined anybody who had been in contact with them. And we just rehashed this message. Please tell us if you have a suspicion that you've been infected. If you're not feeling well, tell your manager. And the fact that we were transparent about the number of cases, I think also drove a openness to be able to share that information. And as of today, even out of a 3,000 organization where 1,700 people are in factories that worked the entire time through this crisis, we didn't shut down any single factory. They were all running honestly at full steam. and actually better in some cases than they were running pre-crisis. And that's something we're trying to learn. Why is that? We have had less than 20 cases globally of COVID, which out of a population of 3,000 with multiple factories in France, a factory in South America and Brazil, in the US, in Canada. Honestly, I think we've been incredibly, I would say lucky, but it's not just luck. The teams planned and executed. They put safety measures in place quickly and people respected them.
And so, David, I want to switch gears just slightly here and go back in time as you were preparing to become the CEO of Guerbet. I'm sure you were crafting your 90-day plan. And then once you arrived, it probably wasn't too long before you were starting to revise what that plan might look like. And I'm interested in the piece of the plan that referred to your leadership and how you were going to approach the CEO role and leading this team to the strategic objectives that were in that plan. Tell us about how you perhaps have modified or reflected on your own leadership style as you've gone through this crisis.
One of the challenges or the things that maybe every leader has in the back of the mind, if you're coming from internally in the organization, which was my case, is to say, how do I become the legitimate leader in front of my peers, what were previously my peers and not my peers, and are no longer my peers? They're my direct report and my teams. And so how do you become a legitimate leader in their eyes? And I would say before the crisis, you have your plans of, okay, I'm going to continue to empower them, make them feel, important, and continue to lead, delegate the right things to them, but bring together the team that we all have the same vision, and we're going to sit down and discuss the vision and create that new vision together. And I would say probably, so we had actually that first meeting, literally at the end of January. We had an offsite with the executive committee, which from a European perspective was before the crisis had really hit. And we had a great session, and then we left out of there and we said, okay, now we're going to go start. That's the first session. How do we start to build that out? And, you never know after a first meeting, how did it go? What are they thinking? What's in their minds? And then 2 weeks later, suddenly the crisis hits from a European perspective and you're the leader. You don't have a choice now. And so to some extent, it provided two advantages in a sense. The first advantage was, well, you're the leader and now you have no choice. And everybody is going to look to you, whether that was their original intention or not. They're now going to look to you for leadership because we have to get through this. And I think that also forced me to maybe step up faster than I would have done before, which meant probably making a few decisions quicker and on my own, but also quickly recognizing which ones needed to be made as a team for us to be able to move forward. And I think that prioritization and that process, in fact, helped us gel very quickly as a team. And actually, one of the first things we did was we instigated, and it's not going to be rocket science because I'm sure every other leader who's gone through this crisis has done the same thing, but we had a daily stand-up call. Every day, 5 p.m., the leadership team, so the executive committee and 3 or 4 other people, every day, 5 p.m., literally for February, March, April, and most of May, actually, every single day, 5 o'clock, we're on the call. And of course, at the beginning, it was 99.9% focused on, are there any new cases? Do we have enough masks? How are we doing to get gel? How do we have absenteeism in the factories? Do we have sick people? How are we getting them? All of the kind of basic stuff. But then you evolve to other subjects and you create a relationship because everyone on the planet is suffering through the exact same thing. So for the first time, I would say in my lifetime, actually, there's a crisis that is impacting everyone. Everyone, everywhere. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what social class you are. It doesn't matter what part of the organization you're in. It doesn't matter whether you're in a factory, whether you're working at home. Everyone is impacted. And that is an incredibly powerful binding function. And honestly, I think it's given us the opportunity to form. If you think back to the storming, forming, norming, performing, it's given us the opportunity to form probably much faster than would have naturally happened. The second thing I would say is it forced us to figure out how to communicate differently, not only among ourselves, but with our teams. And what I also saw is that our leaders and the leaders inside their teams really occupied the field and the space as a leader. They were walking the floors. They were 10 times more in touch with their teams from a frequency perspective than we probably would before. And this has started to create a engagement. And I think that's one of the things that we're learning as to why the factories worked so well during this time period. It's an engagement that we've never seen before. again, if you think about it, of course, if I communicate with you clearly on a regular basis what our objectives are and where we are versus those objectives, we're doing well here, we're not doing so well here. Everybody knows where to run. Everybody is aligned. And I think those two things, it forced me to step into, I didn't have a choice. You forced me to step in the role. It helped us to form faster, and it forced us to communicate and interact with our teams differently. And that drove an engagement that I think we wouldn't have accomplished otherwise.
It sounds like you've been very successful, and your team is lucky to have you, David. So what does the future look like for Guerbet? How are you thinking about leading into this new reality?
One of the things that we did early on was we set up what we call the next normal team. And so basically, once we kind of got through, so the first week was complete panic. Everybody's working from home. You're working from 7 a.m. until midnight because the space between work and home has suddenly disappeared, right? And you got to get organized. The second week, you kind of start to get organized and you realize, okay, I actually have to plan to stop and eat lunch. I have to plan to finish my day. And then the third week, now that you've got that organized, you start to say, okay, there's definitely going to be a pre and a post-COVID. Either we're going to start with the assumption that post-COVID is going to look like pre-COVID and it'll just go back to normal, or we say there's going to be some things that are going to change dramatically and we want to be ahead of the curve. Our assumption, and the whole team was aligned around this, was to say there will definitely be a pre and a post. So we built what we call kind of next normal teams, focused on how we interact with customers, how we engage and motivate our employees. What is our purpose, our raison d'être? We have another team focused on how does it change how we need to change. Today we have a policy where you have to be in the office at minimum 4 days a week. We want to relook our remote working policy. And if we want to relook that, what does it look like and what does it mean? What did we learn during this? And we took not executive committee leaders, but one level below that leaders to lead those initiatives. Why? Because we want to embark the whole organization with us on this journey. So as a concrete example, even if our sales suffered during this period, we still had actually quite a bit of sales. And we're in an industry where you have pharma sales reps, and pharma sales reps go out every day and do milk runs and they go see all of their customers. Well, interestingly enough, we're actually selling without being able to do milk runs. So does that mean, and the salespeople, how were they doing it? Well, they're calling, they're talking with the radiologist on the phone. They're trying to build new leads by connecting with their resources digitally. We're doing webinars to try and stay in contact. And guess what? It works. So the team is looking at what is the new model of sales and engaging your customers post COVID. And there's been quite a few studies that have done by several of the McKinseys, the Bains, the BCGs, the Accentures of the world, that you look at how did I buy before and how do I plan to buy after? And I think you're going to see a dramatic difference. And so our goal is to say, we don't want to come out of this being the one who's wait and see. We want to come out of this leading. And I think we have the advantage of being a smaller organization as Guerbet, that we can be a little bit more, maybe more agile than some of our bigger competitors, and really get ahead of that. So we've organized these teams to say, okay, take on this challenge, help us define what post-COVID is going to look like for Guerbet across our different parts of the organization. How do we really take advantage of that and use it to actually get ahead?
One last follow-up to that, because I think this is fascinating and I love how forward-looking it is. You mentioned that you have assigned, let me call it, next generation leaders to these different initiatives. As you think about your executive committee of the future, are you thinking differently about what leadership skills you'd like to help these next generation leaders develop?
That actually is something we had thought about. I thought about actually before I took the role. And I would say the two things that have not changed but have accentuated in importance is the ability to really engage. Guerbet is in the process of going through a transformation as a company. And to be able to go through that transformation, you need the entire company coming with you on that transformation. It can't just be the executive committee sitting at the top. But if you want to bring the company, that means the executive committee has to be with authentic leaders who are able to be open, engage their teams, communicate regularly, and be comfortable with communicating regularly, and be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's when I was preparing to take the role, that was already in my mind to want to do that, to kind of evolve Guerbet. And I think what I would say is it's only reinforced 1,000 times my belief that we need to do that. And I would say any doubters that I had in the executive committee before COVID are not doubters anymore. we've kind of just joked among ourselves because we said, these calls every 2 weeks, honestly, it feels like we're saying the same thing. And at a certain point, we ask ourselves, can we switch to like once a month now or something? I don't know. And we mentioned on like a month ago on one of the calls, we said, yep, so we definitely want to keep this up, but we're thinking on slowing it down to probably once a quarter once we get through it. And when we do these calls, it's set up with a chat option on the right-hand side of the screen. So we answer questions live. And we got like not 5,000 comments, but literally, no, you have to keep doing this. Please don't stop. Every 2 weeks, okay, maybe you go to once a month, but please don't stop doing this. And so then we started asking our teams to say, hey, is it just a few people who, actually typed it, or what do you think? And even they were saying, no, it's so much. As a leader, I spent time, but not me personally, but these teams spent time before re-communicating messages. So we would have a call with all the leaders would have a call with their leaders would have a call with their leaders. And it's a little bit like, I don't know what you call the game, where I whisper something in your ear and it has to go around the table.
Telephone.
Exactly. And the last person has to try and say what the first one says. And it's never the same thing. And the reality is, now that we're communicating these messages from the executive committee throughout the entire organization, the efficacy of the leaders is 10 times better because they don't spend the first part of the time explaining what the decision is. We did that. They spend their time focusing on, okay, how do we as a team align and drive and deliver our part of helping the organization achieve that and drive that transformation. We know what the message is. We all heard it. So I can re-explain if you got questions, but we don't spend a lot of time doing that. Now we spend time focusing.
Communication. Like you say, it sounds so simple, but like most leadership challenges, hard to do. Thank you, David, for all of your insights. Wishing you and the team and Guerbet the best. Sounds like you guys are really set up for success and have a great leader at the helm. So thank you again.
We have a great team. Thank you.